Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused, the 1993 high school pothead movie. Is this movie any good? It is in the Criterion Collection, so let's explore why it might be, why this movie, you might call it great, or you might appreciate this movie, coming up next. One of Richard Linklater's early movies, Dazed and Confused from 1993, is, on the one hand, a Gen X disaffected Gen X movie, but it's also a nostalgia movie looking back at high school in the United States, in Texas, in 1976, the year in which it takes place. On the one hand, this movie is an homage, as is known, to George Lucas's American Graffiti and other similar boomer movies, let's say maybe Animal House, but it's also in the vein of disaffected high school movies coming out in the 1980s to the early 1990s. The Breakfast Club, which I have a video of on this channel. The movie Say Anything by Cameron Crowe, I think, is all over this movie. In that movie, Say Anything, there's an extended party scene as the characters graduate from high school. Dazed and Confused kind of takes that feel, that party scene, and extends it throughout the entire movie because it's one night in the life of several, in fact, dozens of high school students when they're getting ready to end the school year. The movie also comes out during a period where there are a lot of pothead movies and there are comedies in the United States. And as a personal note, I always took this movie in the 1990s to be just one of those movies. There was nothing much to it. In fact, nothing much happens in this movie. It's supposed to be a stoner movie that you can relate to the characters. I never related that much to them, so I never took this movie seriously when I was in my early 20s or even earlier than that. But I rewatched this pretty recently, and I watched it a couple times. I thought, well, this movie is actually really good for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's really well put together. Seamlessly blends all kinds of scenes, introducing each character, and there must be 15 to 20 characters in this movie of importance to the movie, seamlessly blends them, the scenes together, and introduces the characters, their problems, all the things. And it seems to be, as Roger Ebert called it, it's an anthropological or sociological depiction of what life was like in 1976. I think this is a really good description, in fact, of what a lot of high schools at the time in 1976 and maybe 1993 were like, what it feels like to be a high schooler in the United States. So if you're from another country or you're much younger than this movie, if you're only in your early 20s, let's say, I think it's good to see this movie and see what was going on. For Richard Linklater, for whom this movie might be autobiographical since he was 16 years old in 1976, but also for a number of people in this sort of late boomer, early to mid Gen X period up to 1993. So I mentioned George Lucas, but I think this movie borrows a lot and really does well with Robert Altman and Robert Altman's style, particularly movies such as Nashville. Ensemble cast blended together, a number of scenes or vignettes that may not come together, maybe loosely related, or on first viewing it's hard to figure out how all of these scenes are related to each other. But let me help you think through a few of the themes of the movie, one of which is clearly high school rebellion, a very typical depiction in high school movies from, the beginning up to the present day. High schoolers are young adults in America, at least, and they're supposed to be rebels. The high school, in fact, here, the mascot is a rebel. All of these characters are trying to be different, forge their own identity. You see early on one of the characters not wear goggles when he's right next to a sign that says wear goggles. This theme of rebelliousness and what does it mean. Remember, this movie takes place in 1976, the bicentennial, the 200th year anniversary of the American Revolution. The founding of America supposedly was a bunch of rebels rebelling against the King of England. Here, are they rebels? But no, in high school movies, these characters are typically in what are prisons, high schools being prisons, jail cells, and teachers in this movie definitely are nothing almost but wardens. And then these characters get to escape for a night. In fact, they're escaping at the end of their school year to go do whatever they want.
Say, man, you got a joint?
No, not on me, man.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
And of course, one of the main characters, the quarterback of the football team, he's given a piece of paper to sign, a written oath to his football coach they will not do drugs or drink, and he struggles with that throughout the movie. Will he sign the document or not? In fact, that's getting towards the end of the movie, what happens between him as the rebel figure who should be a good soldier and do whatever the coach says, or will he rebel against the coach? There's several smaller instances like that in the movie, which we ask the question, are high schoolers really rebels, or do they conform with the systems, or will they continue to conform throughout their lives as adults? The theme of listlessness and apathy come up in this movie all over the place. Who are these characters going to become? What is the goal of adulthood? What is the goal of life? It feels like this movie can't even, and I think this is deliberate as a description of the way things could be or are, they can't figure this out. In fact, they don't even talk much, if at all, about college or getting a job outside of high school. As a lot of earlier high school films do, The Breakfast Club obsesses about what adult life is like, what these kids will be like when they're adults. Almost we're cut off from that possibility that these kids will never grow up, or they don't know the purpose of their lives at all, and that purpose isn't even given to them. So thus they fulfill the title, Dazed and Confused, which is not just about smoking pot and, being stoned, but it is about being a high schooler or a young person, particularly in the United States at this time. Remember, this is a Gen X movie, early 1990s, and not having a clue what life is all about, what you should do with your life. You don't want to follow the rules, but you're not sure what other paths there are. So these kids remain in a state of sort of perpetual entertainment, and they sort of try to fulfill themselves by being together and doing what they're doing on the weekend or after school. Now, that's not to completely disdain these characters at all. They are having fun, and they're having fun outside the system of school and of parents, period. And I think the movie celebrates that to some extent with the party atmosphere in particular, where everyone's learning to sort of get along, grow up, and, have relationships with each other. These characters really relate to each other pretty well. But there is a threat of violence in this movie all over the place. And I find on rewatching it's very disturbing that the seniors are harassing and even harming physically the freshmen, chasing after them with paddles, as the Ben Affleck character does. Even the Parker Posey character, so the men and women are both involved in hazing here, bullying, and so these becoming these authority figures within the group of students who are going to harm other people and sort of create a hierarchy. That would seem to go against the rebellion theme. And in fact, the freshmen try to get away or harm back the seniors who are trying to hurt them, and they may be the ultimate rebels in this movie. These young characters, including this young character is going to be a freshman, the pitcher, and he ends up going to the party, getting his first taste of beer and pot and being with older women. He's the ultimate rebel figure, perhaps, in this movie. And I think the director here wants us to see two sides of high school life. One is the older kids, and one is the younger kids. And he's blending them together, and they are unified, but they're very different as well. The more I watch this movie, the more there is to it. I think the ending is really poignant and interesting as the characters are on the football field talking about their lives in the high school town and in the high school itself. And I think once again, Dazed and Confused is a good example of depictions of American high schools. And then these movies ask this question, as The Breakfast Club does, as Say Anything does, of what in the world high school is for. Is it just sort of a holding pin for young people until they become 18 and then they're let loose? Is it a kind of jail? And if it is, as it feels like to me in this movie, these characters want out, they want to go have fun, they want to be their own person, as it were, and high school doesn't allow them to be. In fact, this is where they encounter violence in their lives. They're more likely to encounter violence in school than they are anywhere else probably in their lives. So why in the world are they in school? These movies ask this question of, why do we do high school or even school the way that we do? Not that there's any answers to those questions, but it wants to depict high school life as sort of malaise and bullying and not having a clue what life is about or what you should do with your life or anything like that. What's the purpose of life? What's the telos of life? These grand philosophical questions. The movie is asking them by depicting the characters in the way that is to me. And so what I really appreciate about this movie is I'm arguing is that I think it describes the real world pretty well, and I think a lot of us, those my age or younger, will be able to identify with many of the characters, though it does feel dated in this movie because, hey, nobody's got a smartphone, so they're all relating to one another, looking each other in the eye, and, having fun together as opposed to being on their phones and doing their own thing. So this movie is different than how you might depict high school life in today, circa 2020. What do you think about Dazed and Confused? Let us know in the comments, and please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you. Have a great day.